The medical files scattered across the marble floor of Reese Vanguard's penthouse like accusations, each page a damning piece of evidence that Izzy held in her trembling hands. 5 months pregnant with his twins, she stood in his home office wearing one of his oversized shirts, her dark hair wild with fury and betrayal. Victoria Sterling. Izzy's voice cut through the silence like a blade. You want to explain to me who Victoria Sterling is, Reese? Reese froze in the doorway, his steel-gray eyes taking in the chaos, his private files exposed, his carefully guarded secrets laid bare. Izzy, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She exploded, waving a psychiatric evaluation report in the air. I understand that I'm not the first woman you've bought like some prized breeding cow. I understand that there was another contract, another desperate woman, another baby that you... Stop. Reese's voice was deadly quiet as he stepped into the room, his hands raised like he was approaching a wounded animal. Just stop and let me explain. Explain what? That Victoria Sterling is currently in a psychiatric facility because of what you did to her? That she lost her baby and you threw her away like garbage? Izzy's voice cracked with emotion, her hand protectively covering her swollen belly. Tell me, Reese, when these babies are born, will I be next? Will I end up in a padded room somewhere, paying the price for the mistake of thinking you might actually care? You think I don't care? Reese moved closer, his composure finally cracking. You think this is just business to me still? I don't know what to think anymore. Izzy backed away from him, tears streaming down her face. You promised no feelings, just a baby. You promised this was just a transaction. But then you make me feel like I matter, like we matter, and now I find out I'm just the latest in a line of women you've used and discarded. Damn it, Izzy. Reese ran his hands through his dark hair, his carefully controlled mask finally shattering. You want to know the difference between you and Victoria? The difference is that I never loved her. I never lay awake at night terrified that something might happen to her. I never watched her sleep and felt my whole world shift on its axis. The difference is that Victoria was a contract, but you. God help me, you're everything. The words hung in the air between them, raw and desperate and more honest than anything he'd ever said. But Izzy's expression didn't soften. If anything, her eyes hardened. And how do I know that's true? How do I know you didn't say the same things to her? How do I know I won't end up destroyed just like she did? Reese stared at her, the weight of his past mistakes crushing down on him like a physical force. Because I would die before I let that happen to you. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand how a $5 million surrogacy contract became the most dangerous love affair in corporate America, you need to know how two people who swore they'd never need anyone ended up needing each other more than their next breath. I can't lose you, Izzy. I can't lose either of you. These words, whispered to an unconscious woman in a hospital ICU, would bring down $1 billion empire and expose a murder that had been hidden for 30 years. Have you ever made a deal with your heart that you knew you couldn't keep? Have you ever tried to separate emotion from desire, only to discover that love doesn't recognize contracts? Tonight's story is about two people who thought they could control their feelings and learned that some forces in this world are bigger than money, bigger than fear, and definitely bigger than any legal agreement. This isn't just another surrogacy arrangement gone wrong. This is about how a ruthless CEO and a desperate scientist entered into the most clinical arrangement possible, only to uncover a web of murder, betrayal, and family secrets spanning 3 decades. It's about the moment when business becomes personal, when protection becomes love, and when the most carefully written contract becomes worthless in the face of real emotion. But what if I told you their arrangement was never random? What if a killer had been pulling the strings for years, orchestrating their meeting, their contract, even their growing feelings, all to cover up a murder that happened before Izzy was even born? Before we dive into this incredible story, do me a favor, hit that like button if you've ever wondered whether love can bloom from the most impossible circumstances. Subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth, because this story will prove that the heart writes its own contract, and it's always in blood, sweat, and tears, never in ink. Now, let me take you back to where this all began, in the sterile boardroom of a Manhattan skyscraper, where a man who had everything was about to lose it all. The 42nd floor of the Vanguard Tower in Manhattan was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered commanding views of Central Park, while the boardroom's massive table was carved from a single piece of ebony that had cost more than most people's annual salaries. But for Reese Vanguard, the CEO who ruled this empire, the opulent space felt more like a prison than a palace. The terms are non-negotiable, Harrison Blackwood said, his voice carrying the satisfied tone of a man who held all the cards. At 59, Reese's stepfather had the silver-haired distinguished look that board members trusted instinctively, which made his betrayal all the more devastating. The Vanguard family trust is explicit. Marry and produce an heir within 12 months, or control of the company transfers to me. Reese stood at the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass, his steel-gray eyes revealing nothing of the rage building inside him. My grandfather never intended. Your grandfather intended to ensure the family line continued. Harrison interrupted smoothly. He couldn't have predicted that his grandson would spend 15 years building walls instead of relationships. The other board members shifted uncomfortably around the table. They'd known Reese since he was a teenager, had watched him transform Vanguard Industries from a modest medical equipment manufacturer into a $6.8 billion pharmaceutical powerhouse. But they also knew about the family trust and about Harrison's legal standing as Margaret Vanguard's widower. 11 months, Reese said finally, turning from the window. You said 12. It's been 4 weeks since you presented this ultimatum. Harrison's smile was razor-sharp. Time does fly when you're not actively seeking a wife, doesn't it? Perhaps if you spent less time in this office and more time actually dating. My personal life is not board business, Reese cut him off. On the contrary, board member Patricia Morse interjected. When your personal life threatens the stability of a publicly traded company worth nearly $7 billion, it becomes very much our business. Reese looked around the table at faces that had once shown him respect, even admiration. Now he saw calculation, uncertainty, and in Harrison's case, barely concealed triumph. I have 11 months, Reese repeated. I'll handle this. See that you do, Harrison said, standing and straightening his tie. Because I'd hate to see your father's company fall into uncertain hands. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. As the board members filed out, Harrison lingered, his expression shifting from public diplomacy to private malice. You know, Reese, he said conversationally, your mother worried about you in those final months. She said you'd built such walls around yourself that you'd forgotten how to let anyone in. It would be tragic if her fears proved prophetic. Get out of my office, Reese said quietly. Of course. But remember, 11 months isn't very long to find a wife and produce an heir. Especially for a man who's proven so incapable of maintaining relationships. After Harrison left, Reese returned to the window, his hands clenched into fists. Below him, New York pulsed with life. Millions of people living, loving, building families with an ease that seemed impossible to him. His phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Dr. Margaret Vanguard's personal effects have been delivered to your apartment as requested. For the first time in hours, Reese allowed himself a small smile. His mother had been brilliant, a geneticist whose research had laid the foundation for some of Vanguard Industries' most profitable developments. If anyone had left him clues about how to navigate Harrison's trap, it would be her. He had no idea that those personal effects would lead him to a woman who would change everything. Across town, in a cramped laboratory in the basement of Columbia University's medical building, Isadora Castellan was fighting her own impossible battle. At 26, she should have been celebrating the completion of her PhD in biochemistry. Instead, she was staring at a stack of medical bills that represented the difference between hope and devastation. Izzy, Dr. Rachel Kim, her former advisor, appeared in the doorway with the expression of someone delivering bad news. I just got off the phone with the grant committee. Izzy didn't look up from the genetic sequencing data on her computer screen. Let me guess. They're pursuing other opportunities or taking the research in a different direction. I'm sorry. I fought for you, but after the funding cuts. Rachel's voice trailed off. They both knew the truth. Without institutional backing, Izzy's groundbreaking research on genetic disorders was effectively dead. How much do you need? Rachel asked gently. For your brothers, I mean. Izzy finally looked up, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. $50,000 a month. For treatments that might extend their lives by a few years. Maybe more if I could finish my research, but... She gestured helplessly at the empty lab around them. Liam and Leo Castellan, her 20-year-old twin brothers, had been diagnosed with Marfan syndrome 6 months ago. The genetic disorder affected their connective tissue, threatening their hearts, blood vessels, and skeletal system. Without experimental treatment, they had perhaps 2 years to live. With treatment they couldn't afford, they might have 10. There has to be another way, Rachel said. Other funding sources, private grants. I've tried everything. Izzy pulled up her laptop screen showing her bank account balance, $247.82. I've been working 3 jobs, sold everything I own, and I'm still $800,000 in debt. The hospital is threatening to discontinue Leo's treatments next week. Her phone rang, another debt collector, probably. But when she glanced at the screen, the caller ID made her frown. Unknown, Manhattan. Dr. Castellan? The voice was crisp, professional, and unfamiliar. My name is Harrison Blackwood. I represent certain parties who might be interested in your research. Izzy's heart leaped. My research? I thought all the funding had been, not funding, exactly. More of a personal opportunity. Are you available to meet this evening? The situation is time-sensitive. What kind of opportunity? The kind that could solve your financial difficulties permanently. The Ritz-Carlton, Central Park South. 7 p.m. Ask for the Blackwood reservation. The line went dead, leaving Izzy staring at her phone in confusion and desperate hope. Who was that? Rachel asked. I'm not sure, Izzy replied. But I think someone just threw me a lifeline. What she didn't know was that Harrison Blackwood had been watching her for months, waiting for exactly the right moment to dangle hope in front of a desperate woman. His plan required someone brilliant, desperate, and completely unaware of the Vanguard family history. Izzy Castellan was perfect. The Ritz-Carlton's private dining room overlooked Central Park, its windows offering a view of the city lights twinkling like stars. But Izzy barely noticed the luxury as she sat across from Harrison Blackwood, trying to understand what he was offering. You're saying someone wants to pay me $5 million to have a baby, she said, her voice carefully controlled. Not just anyone, Harrison replied smoothly. A very successful businessman who finds himself in need of an heir for business reasons. The arrangement would be entirely professional. No emotional attachment, no ongoing relationship. This sounds like something out of a dystopian novel. Harrison smiled. I understand your skepticism. But consider your alternatives, Dr. Castellan. Your brothers need immediate medical intervention that costs $50,000 monthly. Your research funding has been eliminated. Your career prospects are, frankly, non-existent given the circumstances. Each word was a knife twisting in an open wound, because they were all true. Who is this businessman? Izzy asked. Someone who values intelligence, discretion, and scientific achievement. Someone who can provide not just the $5 million for the arrangement, but ongoing medical care for your brothers and eventual funding for your research. Izzy's hands trembled as she reached for her water glass. And what would I have to do exactly? Carry his child. Live in his residence during the pregnancy for appearances. Present as his fiancée for business purposes. After the birth, you would be free to resume your life with more resources than you've ever dreamed of. And the child would be raised by the father. You would have no parental rights or responsibilities. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Izzy closed her eyes, thinking of Leo's last medical report, of Liam's increasingly frequent episodes, of the research that could save not just them but thousands of other families facing similar genetic nightmares. I need to think about it, she said finally. Harrison reached into his briefcase and withdrew a thick envelope. Of course. But as I mentioned, time is a factor. Inside this envelope is a contract with all the terms clearly specified, along with a cashier's check for $100,000, a good faith gesture to cover your brother's immediate medical needs. Izzy stared at the envelope like it might bite her. Why me? There must be thousands of women who would agree to this. Intelligence, Harrison said simply. The father specifically requested someone with your educational background and research credentials. He believes that genetic compatibility and intellectual capacity are important factors in offspring development. He wants to breed a superior baby, Izzy said flatly. He wants to ensure his child has every possible advantage, Harrison corrected, including a mother brilliant enough to contribute optimal genetic material. The clinical language made Izzy's stomach turn, but the envelope in front of her represented Leo's next treatment, Liam's experimental medication, and hope for a future that had seemed impossible just hours ago. 24 hours, Harrison said, standing. That's how long the offer remains open. After that, he'll pursue other options. As Harrison left, Izzy sat alone in the opulent dining room, staring at the envelope that contained either her salvation or her soul's destruction. She had no way of knowing that Harrison had already made the choice for her. The mysterious businessman wasn't some faceless client. It was Reese Vanguard, Harrison's stepson. And this entire arrangement was part of a decades-long plan for revenge that had begun the day Harrison decided that if he couldn't have Margaret Vanguard's love, he'd destroy her son instead. The contract in the envelope was just the first move in a game that Izzy didn't even know she was playing. But sometimes, the most dangerous games are the ones that end up saving everyone involved. And there's the trap being set, but what Harrison doesn't realize is that some arrangements take on a life of their own. Izzy's about to make a choice that will change not just her brother's lives, but everything she thought she knew about love, loyalty, and the difference between being bought and being valued. Are you hooked? Because the next part is where Izzy meets the real Reese Vanguard, and their clinical arrangement starts becoming something neither of them can control. Hit that like button if you're ready to see how a business transaction becomes the most dangerous kind of love affair, and let me know in the comments, would you make the same choice Izzy's facing? 23 hours and 17 minutes after leaving the Ritz-Carlton, Izzy sat in the intensive care unit at Mount Sinai Hospital, watching her brother Leo struggle to breathe through an oxygen mask. The monitor beside his bed beeped erratically, each irregular rhythm a reminder that time was running out. The insurance company denied the latest treatment, Liam said quietly from the chair beside her, his own breathing labored. As twins, both brothers shared the same genetic time bomb, but Leo's condition was progressing faster. They're calling it experimental. Izzy squeezed Leo's hand, feeling how thin his fingers had become. At 20, he should have been in college, chasing girls, planning his future. Instead, he was fighting for every breath while she sat there with a contract that could save his life clutched in her other hand. Izzy. Leo's voice was barely a whisper through the mask. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't sacrifice yourself for us. You're my brothers, she said fiercely. I'd do anything for you. We know, Liam replied. But Leo's right. You can't save us by destroying yourself. If only they knew how literally they were speaking. Her phone buzzed, a text from the unknown number. 17 minutes remaining. RV. RV. The mysterious businessman had initials, at least. Somehow that made him feel slightly more human, though no less intimidating. Izzy looked at her brothers, Leo fighting for breath, Liam trying to hide his own symptoms to avoid worrying her further, and made her choice. She signed the contract with a pen borrowed from a nurse, her signature sealing a deal that would either save them all or destroy her completely. Within minutes, her phone rang. Dr. Castellan. The voice was deep, authoritative, and definitely not Harrison Blackwood. I assume you've made your decision. I have. Izzy's voice was steadier than she felt. I accept your terms. Excellent. We'll meet tomorrow evening to finalize arrangements. 8 p.m., penthouse level of the Vanguard Tower. Security will be expecting you. Wait, Izzy said quickly. You're Reese Vanguard? Of Vanguard Industries. There was a pause. You know the company? Your mother's early research on genetic therapy was groundbreaking. Margaret Vanguard pioneered techniques that I've been trying to build upon in my own work. Another pause, longer this time. I wasn't aware you were familiar with her research. She was brilliant. Her work could have revolutionized genetic medicine if she'd lived to complete it. Yes, Reese said quietly. It could have. 8 p.m. tomorrow, Dr. Castellan. We have a great deal to discuss. The elevator to the penthouse level of Vanguard Tower was a study in understated luxury, polished steel, soft lighting, and a silence so complete that Izzy could hear her own heartbeat. When the doors opened directly into Reese Vanguard's private residence, she stepped into a world that looked like it belonged in an architectural magazine. The space was massive, at least 8,000 square feet of clean lines, floor-to-ceiling windows, and furniture that probably cost more than most people's homes. But despite the obvious wealth, it felt sterile, impersonal. Like a beautiful hotel room that no one actually lived in. Dr. Castellan. Izzy turned toward the voice and felt her breath catch. Reese Vanguard was nothing like she'd expected. Yes, he was tall, probably 6'3", with dark hair and those steel-gray eyes she'd heard described in business magazines. But what the articles hadn't captured was the intensity that radiated from him, the sense that beneath his perfectly tailored suit was a man who had been through battles that left invisible scars. Mr. Vanguard. She extended her hand, proud that it didn't shake despite her nerves. His handshake was firm, brief, and surprisingly warm. "Thank you for coming. Would you like something to drink?" "Just water, please. I prefer to keep a clear head for business discussions." Something that might have been approval flickered in his eyes. "Practical. I appreciate that." He moved to a bar area that probably contained liquor worth more than her graduate school tuition. "I trust you've reviewed the contract thoroughly?" "Several times." Izzy accepted the water he offered, noting that he poured himself scotch. "I have questions. I'd be surprised if you didn't." Reese settled into a chair across from her, his posture relaxed but somehow coiled, like a predator at rest. "Ask them. Why me? And don't give me the genetic compatibility answer your representative provided. There are thousands of women with PhDs who would agree to this arrangement." Reese was quiet for a moment, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. "Your research," he said finally. "Your dedication to your family. Your unwillingness to compromise your ethics even when it costs you professionally. You investigated me. Thoroughly. Due diligence is important when entering into any partnership." His eyes softened slightly. "I know about your brothers, Dr. Castellan. I know about the funding that was mysteriously pulled from your research. I know you've been working 3 jobs while trying to save their lives." The clinical assessment should have made her angry, but instead, she found herself studying him with equal intensity. "And what did your investigation tell you about my character? That you're brilliant, stubborn, and utterly incapable of giving up on the people you love." Reese took a sip of his scotch. "That you'd rather sacrifice yourself than watch your family suffer. That you see this arrangement as exactly what it is, a necessary transaction to save the people who matter most to you." "And what about you?" Izzy challenged. "What kind of man pays $5 million for a baby and calls it a business transaction?" For the first time, Reese's composure flickered. "A man who has 11 months to produce an heir or lose everything his family built. A man who learned early that emotional attachments are liabilities that can be exploited by enemies. That sounds lonely. Lonely is a luxury I can't afford." Reese's voice was flat, but something in his eyes suggested otherwise. "This arrangement benefits us both, Dr. Castellan. You get the resources to save your brothers and continue your research. I get the heir I need to maintain control of my company. Simple, clean, mutually beneficial. And after the baby is born, you disappear from our lives. The child is raised by me with the best education, healthcare, and opportunities money can provide. You resume your career with more funding than you've ever dreamed of." Izzy set down her water glass, her decision already made but needing to voice one final concern. "Mr. Vanguard, I need you to understand something. I'm not doing this lightly. The idea of carrying a child and then walking away, it goes against everything I believe about family and motherhood. But you're doing it anyway, because my brothers will die without treatment, and your money can save them." She met his gaze directly. "But I won't pretend this doesn't cost me something. And I won't pretend that walking away from a child I've carried for 9 months will be easy." Something shifted in Reese's expression, surprise, perhaps, or respect. "I wouldn't expect it to be. As long as we understand each other." Izzy reached for her purse. "When do we start?" "Immediately. You'll move in here tomorrow. For appearances, we'll need to present as an engaged couple who fell in love quickly. The business community needs to see stability, commitment, and genuine affection." "Fake affection," Izzy corrected. "Convincing affection," Reese countered. "There's a difference." The next evening, Izzy stood in the guest wing of Reese's penthouse, staring at a bedroom that was larger than her entire former apartment. Her few possessions looked pathetically small in the massive space: a single suitcase, her laptop, and a framed photo of her with her brothers from before they got sick. "The closet has been stocked with appropriate attire," Reese said from the doorway. "You'll need to look the part of a successful businessman's fiancé." Izzy opened the walk-in closet to find dozens of designer outfits, shoes, and accessories. Everything in her exact size. "You've been thorough. As I said, due diligence is important." Reese stepped into the room, maintaining careful distance. "We'll need to establish some ground rules for living together. Such as? Separate bedrooms, obviously. Shared meals when I'm home, to maintain the illusion of domestic bliss. Public appearances will require physical affection, hand-holding, casual touches, the kind of intimacy that convinced couples display." "Fake intimacy," Izzy said, echoing their earlier conversation. "Convincing intimacy," Reese repeated, but this time there was something different in his voice. We'll also need a cover story for how we met, how long we've been together, and why we're moving so quickly toward marriage and children. What did you have in mind? We met at a medical conference 6 months ago. You were presenting research that impressed me, both professionally and personally. Our relationship developed quickly due to our shared passion for advancing genetic medicine. The engagement is recent, and we're both eager to start a family. That's actually not far from the truth, Izzy observed. Except for the part about being in love. The best lies are built on foundations of truth. Reese moved to the window, looking out at the city lights. Dr. Castellan, Izzy, I want you to understand something. This arrangement may be transactional, but I'm not a monster. I'll ensure you're comfortable, safe, and have everything you need, including medical care, the best money can buy. Dr. Sarah Chin will be handling your prenatal care. She's one of the top maternal-fetal medicine specialists in the country. And your brother's treatments have already been arranged with Dr. Michael Rodriguez at Sloan Kettering. Izzy felt tears prick her eyes. They start tomorrow? Dr. Rodriguez is expecting them at 9 a.m. Reese turned back to her, his expression carefully neutral. I keep my word, Izzy. Whatever else you might think of me, remember that. Why are you being so generous? The contract only specified. The contract is a legal document. Reese interrupted. It doesn't dictate how I choose to treat the mother of my child. The phrase mother of my child hung in the air between them, more intimate than either had expected. For a moment, the clinical nature of their arrangement wavered, replaced by something warmer and infinitely more dangerous. I should let you settle in, Reese said, his voice rougher than before. Good night, Izzy. Good night, Reese. After he left, Izzy sat on the edge of the massive bed, looking at the photo of her brothers. In a few hours, they would receive treatment that could save their lives. In a few weeks, she would likely be pregnant with Reese Vanguard's child. And somehow, despite the clinical nature of their arrangement, she was already starting to wonder if the most dangerous part of this deal wasn't the pregnancy itself, but the growing sense that Reese Vanguard wasn't quite the cold businessman he pretended to be. Can you feel the chemistry building between them, even through all their walls and contracts? They're both trying so hard to keep this clinical, but every conversation reveals a little more humanity, a little more connection. Drop a comment below if you think this arrangement is going to stay purely business, because what's coming next will test every boundary they've tried to establish. 3 weeks later, Izzy stood in the kitchen of the penthouse at 6 a.m., fighting a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with morning sickness and everything to do with terror. The pregnancy test in her hand showed 2 clear lines, confirming what they'd both expected but somehow hadn't prepared for emotionally. Izzy? Reese's voice came from behind her, rough with sleep. Are you all right? She turned to find him in the kitchen doorway, wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt that showed he was apparently human enough to have rumpled hair and stubble in the morning. The casual domesticity of the moment made her chest tight. It's positive, she said simply, holding up the test. Reese went very still, his gray eyes locked on the small plastic indicator that had just changed both their lives forever. How do you feel? Terrified, Izzy admitted. You. The same. He moved closer, stopping just within arm's reach. Are you experiencing any symptoms? Nausea, fatigue? Some. She set the test on the counter and wrapped her arms around herself. Reese, I know this is what we planned, but now that it's real. I know. His voice was gentler than she'd ever heard it. It's different when it's actually happening. I should call Dr. Chin, schedule the first appointment. I'll drive you, Reese said immediately. To the appointment, I mean. We should both be there. Izzy looked at him in surprise. That's not necessary. The contract doesn't require. Forget the contract, Reese said, running a hand through his dark hair. You're carrying my child, Izzy. Whatever else this is, whatever arrangement we have, I'm not going to be an absent father from day one. The word father seemed to hit him as hard as it hit her. This was really happening. In 8 months, there would be a baby, a tiny human being who was half her, half him, and completely dependent on them both. Okay, she said quietly. We'll go together. Over the following days, they settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. Reese left early for the office but returned by 7 each evening. They shared dinner and conversation that gradually moved beyond the logistics of their arrangement to discussions of her research, his company, and the strange new reality of living together. Your mother's research notes, Izzy said one evening as they sat in his study. She working on her laptop while he reviewed quarterly reports. Have you ever considered continuing her work? Reese looked up from his papers. I'm not a scientist. But you own a pharmaceutical company with the resources to fund research that could revolutionize genetic medicine. Izzy turned her laptop to show him her screen, a complex molecular diagram. Look at this. If I'm right, combining her early work with current technology could lead to treatments for dozens of genetic disorders, including your brother's condition, including Marfan syndrome, yes, but also Huntington's disease, cystic fibrosis, muscular dystrophy, the list goes on. Her eyes lit up with passion as she spoke. Reese, we could save thousands of lives. He was quiet for a long moment, studying both the diagram and her face. Izzy stopped, realizing what she'd said. I meant you. Your company. No, you meant we. Reese closed his laptop and gave her his full attention. You're thinking beyond the contract, beyond the arrangement. You're imagining a future where we work together. I shouldn't be, Izzy said quickly. That's not what this is. Isn't it? Reese stood and moved to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the dark glass. I've been thinking the same thing, Izzy. About what happens after the baby is born, about whether walking away from each other will be as simple as we thought. The admission hung between them like a live wire. They were supposed to be keeping things clinical, professional, free of emotional complications. Instead, they were talking about futures and partnerships, and we instead of I. This is dangerous, Izzy whispered. Yes, Reese agreed, turning back to her. It is. But neither of them moved to create distance. Neither of them retreated to safer ground. Instead, they sat in the charged silence, both knowing they were crossing lines that the contract had specifically forbidden them to cross. The first prenatal appointment is tomorrow, Izzy said finally. I'll be ready at 9, Reese replied. As they said goodnight and retreated to their separate bedrooms, both knew that something fundamental had shifted. The arrangement was supposed to be about business, about necessity, about two people getting what they needed without emotional involvement. Instead, it was becoming about something neither of them had planned for, something that couldn't be controlled or contracted or contained. It was becoming about them. The walls are starting to crumble, aren't they? What started as a clinical arrangement is becoming something real, something that threatens everything they thought they knew about their carefully controlled lives. But here's what you need to understand. Their growing feelings are the least of their problems. Because someone has been watching, someone has been planning, and their happiness is about to become a weapon in a war they didn't even know they were fighting. Hit that like button if you're invested in this beautiful, complicated love story, and tell me in the comments, when did you realize they were falling for each other? Because the next part is where their perfect arrangement starts to unravel, and the real danger begins. For months into the pregnancy, Izzy lay on the examination table in Dr. Sarah Chen's office, her hand unconsciously gripping Reese's as the ultrasound wand moved across her belly. What had started as a routine prenatal appointment was quickly becoming something much more significant. Well, this is interesting, Dr. Chen murmured, her eyes fixed on the monitor screen. Interesting how? Reese asked, his voice tight with concern. He'd barely left Izzy's side since her morning sickness had intensified, working from home most days and personally ensuring she ate enough to maintain her strength. See this? Dr. Chen pointed to the screen, where two distinct shapes were visible in the swirling gray of the ultrasound image. Congratulations. You're having twins. The silence in the room was deafening. Izzy stared at the screen, watching two tiny hearts beating in perfect rhythm, while Reese went completely still beside her. Twins, Izzy whispered. Are they healthy? From what I can see, yes. Two healthy babies, about 18 weeks along. Dr. Chen smiled warmly. This does change things significantly, though. Twin pregnancies require more monitoring, more rest, and there's increased risk of complications. What kind of complications? Reese's voice was sharp with worry. Preterm labor, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia, all more common with multiples. But with proper care, the vast majority of twin pregnancies result in healthy babies and healthy mothers. As Dr. Chen printed out copies of the ultrasound images, Izzy felt tears sliding down her cheeks. 2 babies. She was going to carry 2 babies for 9 months, give birth to them, and then walk away from both. Izzy. Reese's thumb wiped away her tears with unexpected gentleness. Are you all right? I don't know, she admitted. This wasn't part of the plan. Plans change, Reese said quietly, his eyes fixed on the ultrasound images Dr. Chen had handed him. Sometimes they change for the better. In the car afterward, they sat in silence for several minutes, both processing the magnitude of what they'd just learned. The contract, Izzy said finally. It specified a child, not children. Does this void our agreement? Reese turned to look at her, his gray eyes intense. Do you want it to? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to voice. I don't know what I want anymore, Izzy admitted. I know what I want, Reese said, his voice rough with emotion. I want both babies to be healthy. I want you to be safe. And I want. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. I want things that weren't part of our original arrangement. Reese, I know. I'm violating the terms. No emotional attachment, remember? His laugh was bitter. Tell me, Izzy, how am I supposed to watch you carry my children, see you sacrifice your body and your comfort for their health, and not feel something? Before Izzy could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she hadn't seen in over a year, Dr. Marcus Webb. I need to take this, she said, her stomach clenching with anxiety. Izzy. Marcus's familiar voice sent a jolt through her system. God, I've been trying to reach you for months. Where are you? Marcus. She was acutely aware of Reese listening to every word. It's complicated. What do you want? I want to see you. I have incredible news about a potential cure for Marfan syndrome. Revolutionary treatment that could save your brothers and thousands of other patients. Izzy's heart stopped. A cure? How is that possible? New funding, new research facilities, unlimited resources. But I need you, Izzy. Your research was the key to everything. Can we meet? Tonight. She looked at Reese, whose expression had gone completely cold. Ah, yes. Where? The coffee shop near Columbia where we used to study. 8 p.m. And Izzy? This could change everything. After she hung up, the silence in the car was deafening. Your ex-boyfriend? Reese said flatly. My former research partner, Izzy corrected. We were engaged, but that ended when he chose his career over helping my family. And now he's back with a miraculous cure, just when you're most vulnerable. Reese's voice was ice cold. How convenient. You think this is a coincidence? I think Marcus Webb's timing is suspiciously perfect. Reese started the car, his movements sharp with controlled anger. But you're going to meet with him anyway. If there's a chance he can help my brothers, there's always a chance, isn't there? There's always someone offering you exactly what you need most, exactly when you need it most. Reese's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. First my stepfather with his mysterious business proposition, now your ex-boyfriend with his miraculous cure. What are you saying? I'm saying that maybe our arrangement isn't as random as we thought. The coffee shop near Columbia was exactly as Izzy remembered, worn wooden tables, the smell of espresso and old books, and students hunched over laptops pretending to study. Marcus Webb sat in their old corner booth, and despite everything that had happened between them, seeing him still caused a familiar flutter in her chest. He looked good, his sandy hair perfectly styled, his clothes expensive, his smile as charming as ever. But there was something different about him now, a polish that seemed artificial. Izzy. He stood to embrace her, and she noticed he smelled like expensive cologne instead of the lab chemicals that had once been his constant companion. You look different. Pregnant, she said dryly, settling into the booth across from him. That tends to change a woman's appearance. Marcus's eyes widened as he took in her condition. Pregnant? But you said you weren't seeing anyone. That was over a year ago, Marcus. A lot has changed. Who's the father? That's not why I'm here. Izzy kept her voice carefully neutral. You said you had news about a cure for Marfan syndrome. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes bright with excitement. Izzy, what I'm about to tell you will blow your mind. I've been recruited by a private research foundation with unlimited funding. They want to continue your work, our work, on genetic therapies. What foundation? The Sterling Institute for Advanced Genetic Research. Brand new, top-of-the-line facilities, the best equipment money can buy. Marcus pulled out a tablet, showing her pictures of a gleaming laboratory that looked like something from a science fiction movie. They specifically requested you as lead researcher. Izzy felt her heart racing. Based on what? My research funding was pulled, my reputation destroyed, based on brilliance that couldn't be suppressed. Marcus interrupted. Izzy, whoever you're with now, whatever arrangement you have, it's not too late to choose your real future. Come back to science. Come back to me. come back to you. Izzy stared at him in disbelief. Marcus, you left me when I needed you most. You chose your career over my family, over us. I was young and stupid and scared, Marcus said earnestly. But I've grown up, Izzy. I understand what really matters now. Family, love, the work that can save lives. And you think I can just walk away from my current life? I think you deserve better than whatever arrangement you have now. Marcus reached across the table to cover her hand with his. You're brilliant, Izzy. You shouldn't be wasting your potential as some rich man's breeding stock. The words hit her like a slap. Excuse me. I know about Reese Vanguard, Marcus said gently. I know about the contract, the surrogacy arrangement, the fact that you're basically being paid to produce his heir. Izzy jerked her hand away. How could you possibly know that? Because I care about you. Because I've been watching out for you, making sure you're safe. Marcus's voice took on a pleading tone. Izzy, you don't have to live like this. You don't have to sell yourself to save your brothers. I can save them. I can save all of us. Who told you about my arrangement with Reese? Does it matter? What matters is that you have a choice. Come with me tonight. We'll drive to the Sterling Institute. You'll see the facilities, meet the team. Your brothers can be transferred there immediately for treatment. Izzy stood abruptly, her mind racing. I need to think about this. Don't think too long, Marcus said, his tone becoming urgent. The position won't stay open forever. And Izzy? Be careful around Vanguard. Men like him don't form emotional attachments. When he's done with you, he'll discard you like everything else in his life. As Izzy walked home through the Manhattan streets, Marcus's words echoed in her mind. But so did Reese's behavior over the past months, his gentleness during her morning sickness, his excitement about the twins, the way he looked at her like she was more than just a contract. Which version of reality was true? Izzy returned to the penthouse to find Reese pacing in his study, his phone pressed to his ear and his voice sharp with anger. I don't care what it costs, he was saying. Find out everything about Marcus Webb's financing, his employment history, and his connection to the Sterling Institute. I want answers tonight. He hung up when he saw her in the doorway. How was your reunion? Reese asked, his tone carefully neutral. Enlightening. Izzy moved into the room, noting the tension in his shoulders. He offered me a research position with unlimited funding and immediate treatment for my brothers. How generous of him. Reese poured himself a scotch with hands that weren't quite steady. And what did you tell him? I told him I needed to think about it. Reese went very still. Are you considering his offer? I'm considering what's best for my family, Izzy replied. Isn't that what this whole arrangement has been about? Has it? Reese turned to face her, his gray eyes stormy. Because somewhere along the way, I stopped thinking of this as just an arrangement. Somewhere along the way, I started thinking of you as. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Never mind. It doesn't matter what I think. It matters to me, Izzy said quietly. Does it? Because Marcus Webb seems to think you're being exploited. He seems to think I'm using you as breeding stock. Izzy felt ice form in her stomach. He said that. He's not wrong, is he? Reese's voice was bitter. That's exactly what our contract says. You carry my children, I pay you, and then you disappear from our lives. Reese, maybe he's right. Maybe you should take his offer. Maybe you should choose the life where you're valued for your mind instead of your reproductive capacity. The words hung between them like a physical presence. But instead of relief at his apparent blessing for her to leave, Izzy felt her chest tighten with something that might have been panic. Is that what you want? She asked. For me to leave? Reese stared at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. What I want and what's best for you might be two different things. Before she could respond, he left the room, leaving her alone with papers scattered across his desk and a half-empty glass of scotch. As she moved to straighten the papers, one folder caught her eye. Victoria Sterling, medical records. With trembling hands, Izzy opened the file. What she found inside changed everything. This is where everything starts to unravel. Izzy's about to discover a secret that will shatter everything she thought she knew about Reese, and Marcus's timing is about to be revealed as more than coincidental. If you're feeling the tension building, hit that like button and tell me in the comments. Do you think Marcus is really trying to save Izzy, or is something darker going on? Because the truth is about to explode in ways no one saw coming. The medical files scattered across the marble floor of Reese Vanguard's penthouse like accusations, each page a damning piece of evidence that Izzy held in her trembling hands. 5 months pregnant with his twins, she stood in his home office wearing one of his oversized shirts, her dark hair wild with fury and betrayal. Victoria Sterling, Izzy's voice cut through the silence like a blade. You want to explain to me who Victoria Sterling is, Reese? Reese froze in the doorway, his steel-gray eyes taking in the chaos, his private files exposed, his carefully guarded secrets laid bare. Izzy, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. She exploded, waving a psychiatric evaluation report in the air. I understand that I'm not the first woman you've bought like some prized breeding cow. I understand that there was another contract, another desperate woman, another baby that you— Stop. Reese's voice was deadly quiet as he stepped into the room, his hands raised like he was approaching a wounded animal. Just stop and let me explain. Explain what? That Victoria Sterling is currently in a psychiatric facility because of what you did to her? That she lost your baby and you threw her away like garbage? Izzy's voice cracked with emotion, her hand protectively covering her swollen belly. Tell me, Reese, when these babies are born, will I be next? Will I end up in a padded room somewhere, paying the price for the mistake of thinking you might actually care? You think I don't care? Reese moved closer, his composure finally cracking. You think this is just business to me still? I don't know what to think anymore. Izzy backed away from him, tears streaming down her face. You promised no feelings, just a baby. You promised this was just a transaction. But then you make me feel like I matter, like we matter, and now I find out I'm just the latest in a line of women you've used and discarded. Damn it, Izzy. Reese ran his hands through his dark hair, his carefully controlled mask finally shattering. You want to know the difference between you and Victoria? The difference is that I never loved her. I never lay awake at night terrified that something might happen to her. I never watched her sleep and felt my whole world shift on its axis. The difference is that Victoria was a contract, but you— God help me, you're everything. The words hung in the air between them, raw and desperate and more honest than anything he'd ever said. But Izzy's expression didn't soften. If anything, her eyes hardened. And how do I know that's true? How do I know you didn't say the same things to her? How do I know I won't end up destroyed just like she did? Reese stared at her, the weight of his past mistakes crushing down on him like a physical force. Because I would die before I let that happen to you. You said no feelings, Izzy whispered, her voice breaking. You promised me no complications, no emotional attachment. But I'm so far past that now, I can't even see the line anymore. And finding out that this happened before, that another woman, Victoria, was never you, Reese said fiercely. Victoria was desperate for money, yes, but she never challenged me. She never made me laugh or made me want to be better. She never made me question everything I thought I knew about myself. But you still destroyed her. I failed her, Reese corrected, moving closer despite her defensive posture. I failed to recognize that she was falling in love with me, and when the pregnancy failed, I failed to provide the emotional support she needed. I was so focused on protecting myself from attachment that I ignored her pain until it was too late. And when my pregnancy is over, when the twins are born and you have your heirs, what happens to me then? Reese stopped just out of reach, his hands clenched at his sides. I don't know, he admitted. Because I never planned on feeling this way about you. I never planned on wanting you to stay. Wanting me to stay? Izzy's voice was barely a whisper. I want you to stay, Reese said, his voice raw with emotion. Not because of the contract, not because of the babies, but because the thought of you leaving terrifies me more than losing my company ever could. But the contract, fuck the contract, Reese said fiercely. The contract was supposed to protect us both from exactly this. It was supposed to keep things clean and simple and emotionless. Instead, I've fallen completely, irrevocably in love with a woman who was supposed to disappear from my life in 4 months. Izzy stared at him, her chest rising and falling rapidly. You love me. I love you, Reese confirmed, stepping closer. I love your brilliant mind and your fierce loyalty and the way you challenge me to be better than I ever thought I could be. I love the way you look at me like I'm just a man instead of a bank account. I love that you're carrying my children not because you have to, but because you chose to save your family. This changes everything, Izzy said, her hand moving to her belly. Yes, Reese agreed. It does. What about Victoria? Will she be all right? She's getting better. I've been paying for her treatment, and she's made remarkable progress. But Izzy, I need you to understand. What happened with Victoria taught me that I can't control love. I can't contract it away or ignore it until it disappears. I can only choose how to handle it. And how are you choosing to handle it now? Reese reached for her hands, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. By being honest with you. By admitting that this stopped being a business arrangement the day you moved in here. By asking you to consider the possibility that we could be a real family, not because of what's written in a contract, but because we choose each other. Izzy looked down at their joined hands, then up at his face, seeing vulnerability there that she'd never glimpsed before. Marcus said you'd discard me when you were done. He said men like you don't form emotional attachments. Marcus Webb doesn't know me, Reese said quietly. And speaking of Marcus, there's something you need to know about his convenient reappearance. What do you mean? I mean that the Sterling Institute he mentioned? It's funded by Harrison Blackwood. My stepfather orchestrated Marcus's return, his offer, everything. He's trying to separate us, to destroy our arrangement and take control of my company. Izzy felt the world tilt sideways. You're saying Marcus is working for your stepfather? I'm saying that everyone who's offered you salvation has been manipulating you for their own ends. Everyone except me. But you manipulated me too, Izzy said. You researched me, targeted me specifically. I researched you. Yes. But I chose you because I saw something in you that reminded me of the best parts of humanity. I chose you because your dedication to your family showed me the kind of person I wanted in my life. Reese's voice grew rough with emotion. What I didn't expect was to fall in love with you so completely that losing you would destroy me. Izzy stared at him, processing everything he'd said, everything she'd learned, everything that had changed between them. If we do this, if we choose each other, what happens to the contract? We tear it up, Reese said without hesitation. We start over as two people who choose to be together, not because of legal obligations, but because we can't imagine being apart. And your company? The trust requirements. We'll figure it out. Together. Izzy looked around the room at the scattered files, the evidence of secrets and manipulations, and the complex web of relationships that had brought them to this moment. Then she looked at Reese, really looked at him, and saw not the cold CEO who had first offered her a contract, but the man who had held her hand during doctor's appointments, who had converted his office into a research lab for her work, who had just confessed his love with the kind of vulnerability that could destroy him if she chose to weaponize it. I love you too, she whispered. The admission seemed to hit Reese like a physical blow. He pulled her into his arms, holding her carefully because of her pregnancy, but desperately because of their mutual need. We're going to have to fight for this, he said against her hair. Harrison won't give up easily, and Marcus will probably try to convince you I'm manipulating you. Let them try, Izzy said fiercely. I've made my choice. But neither of them knew that at that very moment, Harrison Blackwood was putting the final pieces of his plan into motion, a plan that would force them to choose between their love and everything they'd built together. Love finally wins, but only for a moment. Because Harrison Blackwood has been playing a much longer game than anyone realized, and he's about to make a move that will threaten not just their relationship, but their lives. Everything they've built together is about to be tested in ways they never imagined possible. Hit that like button if you're rooting for Reese and Izzy to overcome whatever's coming next, and tell me in the comments. Did you see the Victoria Sterling twist coming? Because the next part is where all hell breaks loose, and they'll have to fight for their love like their lives depend on it, because they just might. The final battle begins now. 2 weeks after their emotional confession, Reese stood in the Vanguard Industries boardroom facing the most important meeting of his life. The emergency session had been called by Harrison Blackwood, who sat at the opposite end of the table with the satisfied expression of a man about to claim his prize. Gentlemen, Harrison began, his voice carrying false regret. I call this meeting to address the recent scandal surrounding our CEO's personal conduct. The board members shifted uncomfortably as Harrison activated a large screen showing newspaper headlines. Tech billionaire's surrogacy scandal, bought and paid for, the Vanguard baby arrangement, and corporate giant treats women as breeding stock. The media coverage has been devastating, board member Patricia Morse said gravely. Our stock price has dropped 12% in the past week. And it's about to get worse, Harrison said smoothly. I have evidence that Mr. Vanguard's arrangement violates multiple company ethics policies and potentially several federal laws regarding exploitation of vulnerable individuals. Reese remained standing at the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. And your solution, Harrison? My immediate assumption of CEO duties while you take a leave of absence to address these personal issues. Harrison's smile was razor-sharp. The company needs stable leadership, not a man who buys women like commodities. That's not what happened, Reese said quietly. Isn't it? Dr. Isadora Castellan was drowning in debt, facing the potential loss of her brothers, when you offered her $5 million to carry your children. How is that not exploitation? Before Reese could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent text from his security team. Emergency at the penthouse. Ambulance en route. The world tilted sideways. Izzy, he breathed. I'm sorry, Harrison said with false concern. Did something happen to your employee? Reese was already moving toward the door. This meeting is adjourned. You can't leave, Patricia Morse called after him. We're voting on a motion of no confidence. Vote however you want. Reese replied without stopping. My family needs me. As he rushed from the boardroom, Reese didn't see Harrison's triumphant smile or the way the older man immediately pulled out his phone to make a call. It's done, Harrison said quietly. He just chose her over the company. Proceed with phase 2. Reese found Izzy on the bathroom floor of their penthouse, doubled over in pain and clutching her 7-month pregnant belly. The paramedics were already working, checking vital signs and preparing for transport. Sir, are you the father? One of the EMTs asked. Yes, Reese said without hesitation. What's happening? Premature labor, possibly caused by stress. We need to get her to the hospital immediately. In the ambulance, Izzy gripped Reese's hand with desperate strength. Something's wrong, she gasped between contractions. It's too early. The babies. The babies are going to be fine, Reese said fiercely, though his own terror was evident in his voice. You're going to be fine. I'm not losing you, Izzy. I'm not losing any of you. Reese, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. If something happens to me, nothing is going to happen to you. If it does, I need you to know, this wasn't just a contract for me either. Not for months. I love you, and I love these babies, and I'm so sorry I can't give you more time. You're going to give me 50 years, Reese said, his voice breaking. You're going to give me a lifetime. At Mount Sinai Hospital, the medical team swept Izzy into surgery while Reese was left in the waiting room, still wearing his suit from the board meeting that now seemed completely insignificant. Dr. Sarachin emerged an hour later, her expression cautiously optimistic. The babies are stable but will need to remain in the NICU for several weeks, she reported. Izzy is in recovery, but there were complications. She lost a significant amount of blood, and she's not conscious yet. Can I see her? Room 314, but she may not wake up for several hours. Reese sat beside Izzy's hospital bed, holding her pale hand and talking to her unconscious form. I can't lose you, Izzy. I can't lose either of you, he whispered. I know I promised no feelings, just a baby, but I've been lying to both of us for months. I love you. God help me. I love you more than this company, more than anything I've ever built. He didn't notice the figure standing in the doorway until she spoke. She's been awake for the last 10 minutes, a woman's voice said softly. Reese spun around to find Victoria Sterling watching him with knowing eyes. She looked healthier than in the photos from her medical files. Her brown hair was styled, her clothes were normal rather than institutional, and most importantly, her eyes were clear and focused. Victoria, Reese breathed. Hello, Reese. She moved into the room, her gaze shifting between him and Izzy. I heard about the early labor. How are the babies? Stable. In the NICU. Reese studied her face, looking for signs of the breakdown that had hospitalized her. You look better. I am better. Therapy helps when it's not being sabotaged by the person funding it. What do you mean? Victoria's expression hardened. I mean, Harrison Blackwood has been paying for my treatment. Yes, but he's also been paying my doctors to keep me medicated and confused, to make sure I couldn't expose his role in our original arrangement. Reese felt ice form in his veins. Harrison arranged our contract? He arranged everything. My financial difficulties, my desperation, even the timing of my approach to you. Victoria moved closer to Izzy's bed. But there's something else you need to know. The reason I had a breakdown wasn't just losing the baby, it was discovering that Harrison killed your father. This is it, the moment when all the secrets explode and the real villain is finally exposed. If this story has you completely gripped, hit that like button and tell me in the comments. Did you suspect Harrison was behind everything from the beginning? Because what's about to be revealed next will change everything you thought you knew about this family. You're awake, Reese said gently, noticing Izzy's eyes fluttering open. I heard. Everything, Izzy whispered, her voice hoarse. Harrison killed your father? Victoria nodded grimly. Thomas Vanguard's car accident 30 years ago wasn't an accident. Harrison tampered with the brakes because he couldn't stand that Thomas had won Margaret's heart. That's why he married my mother, Reese realized. Not for love, but for revenge. And control, Victoria added. He's been systematically destroying your relationships for years, ensuring you'd be isolated and desperate enough to make the kind of arrangement that would give him grounds to remove you as CEO. The surrogacy contract, Izzy said weakly. He knew it would create a scandal. He orchestrated the scandal, Victoria corrected. He's the one who leaked the story to the press. He hired Marcus Webb to approach you with that fake cure offer. He's been planning this for years. Before anyone could respond, Harrison himself appeared in the doorway, flanked by two men in expensive suits. Well, Harrison said, his mask finally slipping to reveal something cold and calculating beneath. A regular family reunion. Though I suppose I should clarify, soon to be former family, once the board votes to remove you, Reese. You manipulated everything, Reese said, standing to position himself protectively between Harrison and Izzy's bed. I planned everything, Harrison corrected. Your father thought he was so clever, stealing Margaret from me, building his little empire. But empires fall, Reese. And this one is falling today. Actually, came a new voice from the hallway. It's not. Agent Sarah Martinez of the FBI entered the room with several other agents, her badge clearly visible. Harrison Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, embezzlement, and the murder of Thomas Vanguard. Harrison's face went white. You can't prove anything. We can, actually, Izzy said, struggling to sit up in her hospital bed. I've been working with the FBI for 3 months, gathering evidence from your home office, your computers, your financial records. Reese stared at her in shock. You've been investigating, Harrison? I've been protecting you, Izzy corrected. The moment I realized our arrangement might not be coincidental, I started digging. Your mother's research notes led me to evidence of financial irregularities. Harrison's been embezzling from Vanguard Industries for over a decade. And Victoria provided the final piece, Agent Martinez added. Her testimony about Harrison's confession regarding Thomas Vanguard's murder, combined with the physical evidence Dr. Castellan helped us gather, gives us more than enough for conviction. As the FBI agents read Harrison his rights, he turned to Reese with undisguised hatred. You think you've won? Even if I go to prison, the board will never accept you after this scandal. You'll lose the company anyway. No, came another voice from the doorway. He won't. The entire board of directors filed into the hospital room, led by Patricia Morse, who looked shaken but determined. We've just learned the truth about your manipulation of this company and this family, Patricia said to Harrison. The board votes unanimously to retain Reese as CEO and to pursue all legal remedies against you. More than that, added board member Robert Shun, we're restructuring the company to focus on the genetic research that Dr. Castellan has pioneered. Vanguard Industries will become a leader in life-saving treatments, just as Margaret Vanguard always envisioned. As Harrison was led away in handcuffs, he called back, This isn't over, Reese. I'll destroy you from prison if I have to. Actually, Victoria said calmly, it is over, because I have one more confession to make. She turned to the FBI agents. I have recordings of everything Harrison told me during my treatment, including his detailed confession to murdering Thomas Vanguard and his plans to kill Reese if necessary. Harrison's face crumpled as he realized the full scope of his defeat. As the agents led him away, the room fell silent except for the quiet beeping of Izzy's medical monitors. 3 days later, Reese stood in the NICU, watching his twin son and daughter sleep in their incubators. They were tiny but healthy, with wisps of dark hair and the determined expressions that already reminded him of their mother. They're beautiful, Izzy said from the wheelchair beside him. She was still weak from the delivery but insisted on seeing the babies every few hours. They're perfect, Reese corrected, his voice thick with emotion. Just like their mother. Reese, Izzy said softly, we need to talk about what happens now. The contract, the arrangement, is over, Reese said firmly. He knelt beside her wheelchair, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Izzy, when we started this, I promised you no feelings, just a baby. I promised you a transaction without complications. You did. I broke every promise I made, Reese continued, opening the box to reveal a stunning diamond ring. I fell in love with you. I wanted you to stay not because of any contract, but because I can't imagine my life without you. So I'm asking you now, not as part of any business arrangement, but as a man who loves you completely. Will you marry me? For real this time? Izzy's eyes filled with tears. What about the company? The trust requirements? The board is restructuring everything. There are no more antiquated requirements about heirs and stable marriages. Vanguard Industries belongs to us now, to our family, to build the kind of company that saves lives instead of destroying them. And Victoria will serve as our head of ethical oversight, making sure we never exploit anyone the way Harrison exploited both of you. Izzy looked at the ring, then at their babies, then at the man who had started as a cold businessman and become the love of her life. You know, when I signed that contract, I thought I was selling my future to save my brothers. And now I realize I was actually buying it. Yes, Reese. Yes, I'll marry you. For real this time. As Reese slipped the ring onto her finger, replacing the fake engagement ring from their arrangement with a symbol of real love, Izzy felt the weight of the past months lifting from her shoulders. So what happens to our children? She asked, looking at the babies they'd both fallen completely in love with. We raise them together, Reese said simply. We teach them that love is stronger than contracts, that family is built on choice rather than obligation, and that the most important inheritance we can give them isn't money, it's the knowledge that they're loved unconditionally. And my research? The Margaret Vanguard Institute for Genetic Medicine will be operational within 6 months, with you as its director. Your brothers will receive the best treatment available, and thousands of other families will benefit from the work you couldn't complete alone. Izzy leaned forward to kiss him, tasting tears she didn't realize she'd been crying. I love you, Reese Vanguard. I love you too, soon to be Mrs. Vanguard. Though I have to ask, are you sure you're ready to be married to a man who's so terrible at keeping his promises? That depends, Izzy said with a smile. What are you promising me now? A lifetime of broken contracts, Reese replied, his eyes twinkling. Because every agreement we make, I'm going to exceed. Every boundary we set, I'm going to cross with more love than you thought possible. Every promise of just business, I'm going to turn into something real and beautiful and completely unprofessional. That sounds like the kind of contract violation I can live with. 1 year later, Reese and Izzy renewed their vows in a ceremony attended by their healthy twins, her brothers who were in remission thanks to treatments developed at the Margaret Vanguard Institute, and Victoria Sterling, who had become not just an employee but a cherished friend. The vows they exchanged bore no resemblance to the clinical contract that had brought them together. Instead, they promised to love each other not because any document required it, but because they chose each other every day, in every moment, with every heartbeat. Harrison Blackwood was serving a life sentence for murder and fraud, his decades-long plan for revenge having ultimately brought together the very family he'd tried to destroy. And Reese Vanguard, the man who had once promised no feelings, learned that the most profitable investment he'd ever made was in love, a return that multiplied every day for the rest of his life. And there you have it, proof that sometimes the most clinical arrangements lead to the most extraordinary love stories. Reese and Izzy's journey reminds us that the heart doesn't recognize contracts, that love can grow in the most unlikely soil, and that the most beautiful families are often formed not through traditional romance, but through the courage to choose each other despite impossible circumstances. Their story teaches us that vulnerability is not weakness but the greatest strength we can offer another person. That sometimes we must risk everything we think we want to discover everything we actually need. And that the most precious things in life, love, family, purpose, can never be bought, only earned through authenticity, sacrifice, and the willingness to let someone see our true selves. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that love conquers even the most impossible obstacles, please share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances and unexpected beginnings. Subscribe to Lux Love Chronicles with Mr. Wentworth for more stories that prove the human heart is capable of transforming even the most transactional relationships into something transcendent. Remember, the richest person in the world isn't the one with the most money, it's the one whose heart is so full of love that no contract could ever contain it. And sometimes, that love story begins with the words, no feelings, just business, only to end with, I choose you, every day, for the rest of our lives. Until next time, this is Mr. Wentworth reminding you that your greatest love story might be disguised as your most practical decision. Trust your heart to know the difference.